Okay, well, thanks for joining us. This is a panel presentation to talk about a collaboration across multiple UC schools that was relatively short-lived. It hopefully will have a lasting impact. And this is specifically to look at integrating the new UC Path system with campus identity and access management systems. So this all started, let me ask you first of all, this is a quiz. This is our presentation to talk about ESB-based HCM to IAM POC. So there's a surprise for anyone who can translate that. Patrick wants to take a stab at it. Very nicely done. I don't know if you all heard that, but this is an enterprise service bus-based human capital management, which is the PeopleSoft HR system, to identity access management proof of concept. That's what this effort entailed. So this started because at UC Berkeley, we've been running PeopleSoft for quite some time, and we were interested in doing a proof of concept integration to try to drive towards real-time integration with HR data. And so a couple of us submitted a budget request for some funding to do that, and it was approved. And we were just about to work towards implementation when it was announced that the UC system would pick a new HR system, and everything was kind of put on hold until that decision was made. So once that happened, we started looking at how could we go back to trying to do that proof of concept. At this point, UC Berkeley was not one of the quote-unquote wave one schools. We were not going to be one of the first to integrate with the UC Path project. UCLA, however, was. So we were interested, though, UC Berkeley, and participating now in some of the integration design with UC Path to save us some resources later. At UCSF, where I also work, we're in the process of trying to do a middleware product selection, and we thought getting some more hands-on experience with a particular middleware stack would be useful. At the same time, the UC Berkeley and UCSF identity management teams are actively working on designing their next generation identity access management systems. And of course, UC Path, the HR system, will be a major input to the identity management system. So the more we can learn about how to improve that, the better at this stage. Finally, I chair the UC Trust work group, which consists of identity access management leads from across the UC system. And we had a number of conversations with people from UCOP around UC Path, from people with Oracle, and the conversations were all very high level and theoretical. And I thought it'd be really useful to get, if possible, a group of very technical people, a small group, focused on integration design. And my hope was that by helping to further that, we would demonstrate the value of that for this and future integrations between UC campuses and central system. So we had this money, and I gave UCLA contacts a call. They were interested. They said they were willing to come up here and participate if we paid for the integration consultant. UC Santa Cruz, another Wave 1 school, was also interested in participating. Stephen Dean, our SOA architect at UCOP, had just joined the staff there, and we thought, what a great opportunity. We're talking about identity access management endpoints and the new UC Path endpoint, and he was the person we needed to talk to about that. And this is a good way for him also to get some awareness of what's happening at the campus level. And at the very end, UC Irvine also asked to join because they were in the process of choosing a middleware product. So that's how this all began. We basically hired a consultant from Fuse, which supports the Apache Service Mix stack, and they have these packaged proof of concept programs that you come in for a week, give them a use case, and you design and build end-to-end your integration. So that's what this is all about. So you're going to hear from participants from UCLA, from UCSF, from UC Santa Cruz, and from UCOP, and more about the overall goals of the effort and the outcome. So I'm going to turn over now to Albert Wu from UCLA. Datta Sharma is also here from UCLA. We have Tamer Sar from UCSF, Stephen Dean from UCOP, and Eric Goodman from UC Santa Cruz, who will be giving you their perspectives. So I'm going to turn over now to Albert.
Hi, everybody. My name is Albert Wu. I'm the Director of Information Management Services at UCLA. I also am UCLA's representative to UC IT Architecture Group. So for UCLA, this all came about as, I would say, a result of a confluence of a number of events. A year ago, just over a year ago, ITLC tasked IT Architecture Work Group, UC ITAG, to conduct a assessment and draft design for a UC-wide user provisioning middleware service. That sort of got the ball rolling. Actually, mostly the members of this panel actually got together and did a early sort of design exercise on what a SOA-based middleware would look like for data exchange and integration across UC identity management services. Around that assessment, UCPath came along, and UCPath has since pretty much dominated all of the conversations regarding SOA middleware integration. Within UCLA at the same time, we were also looking at advancing our particular technical capabilities, moving integration from the traditional batch FTP-based interfaces to something, let's just say, a bit more modern. And within that, obviously, UCPath and all the HR payroll integration is a big topic. But we're also looking at this for a number of other services. For example, within UCLA, we're looking at student information integration in its next generation, next form. And SOA service bus technologies have come up in that discussion. We're also exploring a number of other more tactical projects. For example, integrating with CashNet in our consolidated billing services via service bus. So all of that basically led to, hey, why don't we look at this from a more strategic enterprise-wide perspective? And that timed perfectly with Deidre's inquiry about why don't we look at this together UC-wide, leading us to this point. And I'll hand off to Data to describe the actual proof of concept project and what they found.
Right. Thank you. I'm Data Sharma from UCLA. I manage identity management for UCLA. So I'm going to focus on some of the positives that came out of the cross-campus collaboration in this effort. So as a proof of concept project, we had to pick up a common use case. So there are like 4 or 5 campuses that had different objectives, they had different goals. But in a very short time, we had to come up with a common use case that we could execute in a week's time. Before we engaged the few consultants for this project, we had to clearly define the scope of project. So one of the goals was obviously evaluate the Fuse ESP platform as an integration solution. And also we wanted to use a real-world use case. So UCPath turned out to be at the right real fit for this one. So 4 or 5 of us campuses got together and worked out, agreed on a common use case, basically, in a very short time. And the next thing I want to focus on is the teamwork, because in order to meet the goals, we had to develop a use case in a week's time that satisfied everyone's needs. And there were programmers with a different background, with different work culture, and we had to develop 4 or 5 different components. Can you show the next slide? Yeah, as you see, this is our integration solution for the proof of concept. On one side, we had the message coming from PeopleSoft. If you focus on the top right, we created a mock endpoint because PeopleSoft was not ready at the time. And then our integration solution is where we process the message using a lot of the techniques. And in the end, the messages went out to the UCLA IDM endpoint as well as UC San Francisco IDM endpoint. So in order to make this work, we had 4 different components. You can see one is a consumer, which took the message from PeopleSoft system, and there is a
Raise your pointer if you want to. It's the red button there.
Okay. I can't see that.
With your laptop.
The red one at the top, I think you said.
To the laptop? Or?
Which one is it? The top red button. You see that there on your Delta? No, it's not working.
Oops. Oh,
There you go.
I better not.
Technology's getting in the way.
Okay, so those are the rectangular boxes on the screen. So each of us took upon ourselves developing each different component, and we used GitHub. So we developed the components, we checked the coding, and then at the end, we're able to compile and put together one solution. So that worked out really well. We were able to help each other. Some of us people were at varying skill levels with this technology, but it really came out really well. And the other thing I want to highlight was the common integration layer that we came out with. So as I said, we picked a UC Path IDM real interface as a use case, and the campus IDMs, the IDM systems had at different campuses, they had a different infrastructure, using different technology, using open source as a vendor product. But for this integration solution, we came out with a common theme. So we took a unified approach and used a lot of the integration technologies as far as that you would commonly use in ESP, message routing, enrichment, protocol transformation. All of those were pretty useful. And in the end, we developed a solution that could serve as a blueprint for developing the UCPath real-time interface. So now, as UCLA being the Wave 1 school, as we started working on more and more detail, I'm realizing how the solution we developed in the proof of concept, how close it is to an actual and implementable solution. UCLA, in fact, already chose an integration platform, and this proof of concept really helped us evaluate the product and pick a solution.
Now I'll pass it on to Tamer.
That's exactly all the stuff that I was going to say. Data was one of the developers in the proof of concept. First of all, my name is Tamer Sar. I'm from the University of California, San Francisco. I've been assigned a new responsibility this year, and this project coincided with that responsibility. So this project is very exciting for me on different levels. From a technical point of view, it's very challenging because we have a lot of systems talking to each other. It was challenging specifically because we were building a system around interfaces that did not exist for UCSF. The HCM side and the new registry side was sort of in design state, and we had to come up with a proof of concept design that accommodates something that does not exist, which is very difficult. But we had a lot of bright people in the room, and we had a good solution to implement, so we sort of decided to go with that. And we came up with something that we think is reasonable as far as a proof of concept. As Albert mentioned, UCSF, we have batch feeds that feed our IDM systems and many other systems, and the delay in information transparency and propagation causes a lot of problems in many situations. So developing a real-time interface and event-driven system was just essential. And we took the opportunity of the new PeopleSoft HCM system and the new IDM system to sort of implement something that can set the ground rules for and learn something new for newer system to come. I wanted to switch to the next. Data, can I have the? So the first thing that we did is we sat down, we decided to, as Data explained, we decided to make this POC as close to real idea as possible, and so to the real integration as possible. So we came up with sort of layout of where the systems exist and how we can connect them together. Even though it's a proof of concept and it took us a week, we've decided to sort of open firewalls and see if we can get GitHub repository going for this initiative. ESP in the middle has mainly 3 components that we utilized, which is the service mix platform, the container, and the CAML, which is a framework for data transformation and mediation. And ActiveMQ is for the messaging layer. And we, as you could see, in reality, UCSF and UCLA will not go through the same ESB, or at least that's my understanding. So in this prototype, we had to actually make it more complex to accommodate channeling of data between from HCM to 2 different IDM systems with 2 different interfaces. One accepts REST on the UCSF side, and one accepts SOAP on the UCLA side. This diagram is one of the first diagrams that we sort of ironed out over and over again. It's extremely complex, and it kind of shows you the various components. You don't have to remember this. This is something that we came up in the beginning, and then we've decided to simplify it quite a bit. All these things sort of talk to each other, but it's not modular. And so the actual proof of concept implementation had a modular need, so we've revised this quite a bit. But this gives you sort of the full picture. This is something similar to what Data showed, and it shows the the HCM endpoint, which we had to write. What you notice here is that we have queuing services between each component, and this is really helpful for us, and it was a learning experience to actually develop in this form, because it allowed us to implement every component in isolation, and we assigned tasks to developers in the proof of concept, and we actually, when we were done, we were able to connect these things together without interrupting each other's work. So putting a queue in the middle really helps develop things in a loosely coupled way. And so the flow goes in, and in the box in the middle, the UCPS IDMS, that's the main transformation component that does transformation and some logic on the payload before it pushes it to the endpoints. This is, just to go back here, this one is outbound HCM, so this information flow leaving HCM to the IDM systems. This one is the reconciliation process the other way around, so it changes in IDM locations, propagate back to the source system, in this case it's HCM, and it goes through very similar components. So one of the things that we learned from this POC beyond collaboration is that all the components are very similar in many ways, and developing something in this form promotes usability, so we can reuse these components over and over again. And I think that's it for that piece. I'll hand this over to Stephen.
To me, excellent. So my name's, good grief, my name is Stephen Dean, and I've just been hired as the SOA architect within UCOP. After 23 years working in the commercial environment, delivering SOA and real-time solutions. And I'm afraid like a hammer views everything as a nail, as a SOA architect, I view every problem as being a SOA solution. So I spent a little bit of time working with these guys. I attended the first 2 days. This POC took 5 days to develop. I spent the first 2 days, participating, and the final day reviewing their results. And I just wanted to take a step back and just ask you guys a question in the room. Why would this be important to you? Why are you all sitting here watching this? Well, what's the significance of this POC, and what's the significance of real-time integration to you? And I would hypothesize, and I've only been in the job for 3 months, and so obviously I'm not completely aware of what all your circumstances are, but I would hypothesize that going forward, the university system and all the campuses within the university system are going to have to adopt real-time integration technologies, and they're going to have to service enable themselves. And by service enable themselves, I mean they're going to have to be able to host shared services that can be called from other applications, within that campus, and from other applications across the campuses. And they're also going to have to make calls to shared services. And this all sounds highly ambitious, but I would also propose there's a degree of urgency involved as well. Because as you guys know, the UC Path project is being rolled out. And while UC Path is actually implementing 97% of its interfaces as the exchange of flat files, there will be some real-time integration. So what you're going to find down the path very soon is that UC Path will expect each of the campuses to be able to provide real-time interfaces. In the case of UC Path, the first real-time interfaces will be in the IDM area. And I think Eric's going to talk specifically about IDM. But to give you an example, UC Path is going to pass is going to be the actual system of record for person. Every employee who enrolls within the university will be onboarded through UCPath and through PeopleSoft. And what's going to happen is that PeopleSoft application is going to pass that person information to the relevant campus. And it's going to expect that campus to provide a real-time interface to update their specific IDM system. So as I said, I think there is a real need for each of the campuses to think carefully and seriously about how they're going to achieve that, how they're going to service enable that particular campus. And what I would say is that this proof of concept provides one potential solution. It provides a set of technologies that provide an infrastructure that allow you to build out services, that will allow you to service enable your IDM systems. It's not the only solution, but I would suggest there's a great deal of synergy. I think naturally the university system would lean towards open source systems, right? And I know some of the challenges you guys have out there. Again, I've only been post for 3 months, but I understand you have really fundamental resource issues. You know, how are you guys going to adopt this new technology when you're all working on other projects? I would suggest again that, you know, this particular POC demonstrated one particular approach. You guys might have seen an earlier talk by Russell and Georgia Tyler, and they talked very much about the same sort of technology. They talked about open source Apache frameworks, the same technology these guys are talking about. They talked about, CXF, Camel, Service Mix, ActiveMQ. What did this POC prove above and beyond that? Well, I would suggest it proved that we can provide those frameworks in a more supported way. This whole POC was built around FuseSource. And FuseSource is a company that actually markets things that you can download from the web for free. And so what's the value proposition? Well, they control the release cycles and they provide assurance. And because you guys out there have so few resources, I suggest you're going to need that level of assurance. So going forward, as I said, I think this proof of concept demonstrated a technology which would allow you to service enable your particular locations, your particular campus, effectively and efficiently. I think it needs serious consideration. It's not the only solution, but I would suggest that it does merit some consideration. Finally, I think there are challenges, and I think people need to consider the total cost of ownership of any solution that they adopt. You need to work out what it's going to cost to provision this stuff, to deploy it out to the campus, because again, my belief would be each campus is going to have a SOAR infrastructure, and that SOAR infrastructure could be based on this stuff. So first of all, you have to work out how that can be provisioned. Is it going to be provisioned in a cloud-like solution? And I do know FuseSource has a product that allows you to actually provision their solutions as a cloud-like solution. And the second thing is, again, in terms of the limited resources available in the campus and the limited range of skills, how are you guys going to actually start building out shared services? How are you going to service enable applications that are truly unable at the moment to actually host shared services? So I know that's a bit of a potted review, and it's probably not terribly coherent. I did give a more coherent talk to the ITAG team earlier this week, or this month rather. But as I said, I think this POC is worthy of your consideration. I think going forward, each one of you needs to be really serious, needs to seriously consider how we are going to adopt real-time interfaces and how we are going to take part in this communal SOAR effort that we're hopefully going to promote through the UC system. Thank you.
Steve, great. And now we're going to hear from Eric.
Okay. So I'm actually involved in this panel in sort of two capacities, so I'll try and keep both of them relatively short. Challenge for me usually. So on the one hand, I'm a representative from UC Santa Cruz, and one of the things, going to the theme of the conference, collaboration, one of the things that was extremely useful for me, and I think for UC Santa Cruz as a whole through that, is I don't believe that UC Santa Cruz is going to be able to stand up our own service bus in the context, in the time frame of this project that's going on. But being able to be there in the planning stages and actually sort of listen in on the coding that was going on, share the code. I was looking in the repository as the code was, well, not as it was being checked in, but shortly after it was checked in, and participate in a code review. is something that normally I wouldn't have had an opportunity to do because it was work happening at other campuses. So it was just really a fantastic opportunity from that standpoint, and hopefully when we are ready to start deploying our own, will give us a lot more insight, because I was trying my best to share back with my peers at the campus what kind of skill sets are we looking at, how much, what are the kinds of issues that people are running into, and so on. And then I have a second role related to all of this, which is that UC Santa Cruz has loaned me to the UC Path project. I'm sort of the mole inside of UC Path for the identity management groups. And I'm spending 2 days a week up in Oakland at the Office of the President, basically meeting with the Oracle consultants and the UC Path staff, going over design documents and strategy and whatnot. And it's so hopefully I'm being helpful there. But how it's relevant to this is there's a lot of thinking that has to go on about what's going to be different when we're doing real-time interfaces or near real-time interfaces as compared to flat file interfaces. All of the PPS interfaces are real-time interfaces. And so there's just a lot of stuff going on around what kind of events inside the PeopleSoft system are going to translate to data that actually becomes that sort of, it was just a placeholder on the left-hand side of this diagram. And again, being involved not just through this POC, but through the UC Trust group ongoing, I think gives us a really good opportunity for, and me being inside UC Path, to bring back information and get campus involvement in a way that I don't think we would have been able to get it if we just had periodic meetings. There's a lot I could say about UC Path, but that's not really the topic here. I think the one other thing that I'll call out that I think we're at least attempting to do a good job on collaborating with is that there's the technical aspects of getting this data flowing over the SOA bus and all of that. But then there's also process changes that are really more functional in nature. This is all to support business process. And so a lot of what we're trying to look at is, well, okay, we're getting stuff real time, but when's the data, and if you look at the business process, when's the data going to show up? Are we getting the data that we need? And again, just having a group, and I'm sort of expanding this to UC Trust, not just, which is the group that Deidre mentioned that works across campuses, identity management people across the campuses, but also this proof of concept, where there's actually a group to come back to and say, look, we're trying to figure out if someone's hired on day 1 and we need them to log in on day 2 and we need XYZ, are these messages, is there enough data in this message? I can design a message that goes out, but is there enough data in this message for you to actually generate the information needed and send the information back? And so I don't really have anything that's that directly related to what was done in this proof of concept, because people down that side did much more of the work than I did. But that's, again, in terms of looking at collaboration, there's been a lot of value to me, both in my role as a UC Santa Cruz employee responsible for receiving this data and in my role up at UC Path and trying to make sure that what UC Path is doing actually matches up with what the campuses need.
Thanks, everybody. And maybe just in closing, I would like to note that, as the panelists already mentioned, we do have a code repository that can be made available to others if you actually want to look at the code. The other thing is, Stephen was talking about service-enabling campuses and Fuse and Apache Service Mix as potential technology tools. UCLA put together a nice list of selection criteria if you and your campus are looking at middleware stacks that you might want to consider. We cribbed their materials and are using it as part of our middleware product evaluation at UCSF, and they've been very gracious about sharing that. So there's a lot of resources here that you might find of value at your campus as you're looking at your integration approach to UC Path and other SOA issues in general. So we have a few minutes if people have questions or comments that they'd like to add.
First off, I just want to say the work, particularly around unique identifiers and opening up services that downstream sites can use is tremendous, and we're very grateful. At the School of Pharmacy in UCSF, we're building out a new public website, and we're using some of the work that you guys have done for our identity authentication and integration. So that's very helpful. But as we do that, we go from a site that's kind of self-contained and that we're able to manage our service level agreements and uptime, and also relatively low complexity as compared to a site where we're doing some real-time polls with CTSI sites, as well as the MyAccess infrastructure for authentication. And for those people like us that are wanting to do the right thing, which is consume the single source of truth from the system of record, but yet when the dean calls and says, why is our site down, they don't care that, well, it's because we have 3 dependency systems and those are the ones that are down, but ours are good. So any concept around how to gracefully fail over, or how to manage that complexity as we go down these paths of integrated systems. And then the second would be just to put a plug in for continuing that road down toward grouping and delegated grouping platforms that would allow us to start to use some type of centralized authoritative grouping technologies would be something that would be very helpful for us at the business unit level.
Do you guys want to take a stab at that? Go ahead.
Okay, so UCLA, so our scenario is not necessarily entirely the same, but we do deploy single sign-on, the shibboleth single sign-on intra-campus, and we have over 400 applications running it. Our experience has been that from a single sign-on and to some extent from a SOA service bus perspective, as far as I'm concerned, we're deploying the equivalent of a network, right? Everyone here depends on a robust and absolute solid network to function. And identity management and a service bus infrastructure is somewhat similar. So it's essentially, I guess, up to those of us who are up here to figure out how to get it to that point. And at UCLA, our fundamental assumption is that single sign-on and identity management is infrastructure. And we do all the things you might imagine that you would expect from a network service provider in the identity front, right? So without going into details, I guess that's the best explanation I have.
Other questions?
So I'm completely new to the identity management. I like this slide. It's overly complicated. But from an end user on the desktop side, has there been talks that maybe map this to the actual HR onboarding process, what it actually looks like from a business process side, what different, access to sites, access to AD, access to whatever you have for those. Is there like an overlay map that would go on top of that really complicated other map of the technology? Because I feel like we like to build things and hope that people will just adopt them and use them. But how do you make sure that people actually use them the way we design it?
Right. Well, this was the diagrams here were more about when a message comes up. I mean, they're kind of content agnostic, the diagrams that were up here. So information's coming from the system and comes along. Your question is more touching along what data is going to be there. And yes, there's absolutely a lot of conversation about because the whole onboarding process is being redesigned through the UC Path project as a whole. And we were actually all talking about this just half an hour ago as we were sitting out prepping for this panel. I'll just say at a high level, right now at the UC Path level, when we talk about onboarding, it's about getting people their accounts, because at least at UC Santa Cruz, there's typically like a 3-day delay between when someone's hired and when their account gets created because of our current business process. And I know at least some other campuses have that. The main thing right now in terms of onboarding is looking at making sure that someone gets their account as quickly as possible and when necessary. The role management, I don't believe that role management is going to be part of phase 1 of UC Path, except maybe exposing what roles you have in the HR system to the extent that may be meaningful to downstream systems. So we'll have information about what your department affiliation is and that sort of thing, but it's not going to be at the level of access management.
I would,
Good point, because I didn't know that there was a distinction between identity and role. I mean, now it makes sense, like you explained it, but
Well, remember the left-hand side of this diagram is the onboarding process in the HR, from the HR standpoint. The right-hand side of the diagram is the identity management system. So the identity management systems do track handling and all of that, but because the way you asked the question, you started with HR, and typically speaking, the HR onboarding process is about getting the person hired and getting their personnel records set up. And most IDM systems actually have additional data that might be managed by an IT group, it might be managed by a departmental group that adds those extra permissions. So that's all I was referring to.
And sort of the quick answer to your question about is there a human-facing version of this where we actually express this in a business process workflow perspective, I would say that's a great idea. Within UCPath, specifically relative to onboarding HR processing, that's something that we're actually talking to various folks about. UCLA being Wave 1 school, one of the challenges we're facing is PATH is a business process reengineering project. So they're actually changing the way onboarding works across UC, and we're sort of on this mutually waiting piece. We're trying to find out what the business process change looks like so we can provide feedback and in turn influence that change. So hopefully in the next few weeks, actually, we'll have some details about that. Our expectation is that from a technologist perspective, we want to use this opportunity to improve that process. So Santa Cruz has a 3-day turnaround roughly. UCLA, depending on who you talk to, has anywhere between real time to many, many days. It depends. And that's why we're looking at service bus internally. We're trying to use this as an opportunity to improve that processing time and not just duplicate the same thing.
Well, and as one final comment, because I know we're at time, I think your point is very well taken. From my perspective, the collaboration between the functional owners who are working on business process reengineering and the technical designers who are working on data integration are sort of moving along in separate but parallel tracks oftentimes. And maybe if there were some similar integration, collaboration between functional owners and IT people on the HR onboarding side for identity management systems and HR staff, that would yield such a diagram, an overlay that you're describing, which I think could be really useful. So it would be really, really nice if that happened more frequently. And it's a challenge. This is a really giant project with many project managers at many levels, and coordinating at that level is a challenge, but would yield tremendous benefits if it happened. So I don't want to keep you guys because I know you're probably hungry. It's 12:20. It's our time. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. You just come up afterwards.
I was wondering about have you dealt yet with Nexus Huston and with the naming infrastructure for building OSGI components and how that works out? And do you have something that's working on that?
Yeah. Actually, we used all of the technologies you mentioned. We used Maven actually for building all of these components. We produced OSGI bundles. So we got an exposure to different technology, basically. So what we are trying to do is we're going to put this up on a wiki. I'm going to share with the UCs. So if you're interested, you can go and download and then implement and then try this for yourself.
Have you read the book?
Thank you all for coming.